Hey guys, so I've just returned from Serbia where I've played 2 open tournaments in a row. The first one I shared 2nd place, and in the second one I won the 1st place. This is the trophy, the cup, very nice. And I won 5 games in a row after losing the first game. So there were 6 rounds, and I lose the first round in a tragic manner, blundering in time pressure to a strong opponent, but still it was very painful. But then I come back and win 5 in a row. I've never in my life had such a fantastic tournament performance. Performance rating is 2230. I gain almost 50 rating points after this tournament. I crossed 2000 ELO in classical chess, and I've played some of the best games in my life, including the first one that I'm going to show you at 99% accuracy. This is crazy, guys. So let's dive into this. First game I lose, second game I win, but it's not nothing too crazy because the opponent is not too strong. I will show you now the third game, which I played at 99% accuracy. So I play white, e4, c5, the Sicilian defense. I play an opponent who is from Turkey here, and he's rated around 1750, but he's a young player and he has already gained some rating after this tournament, so he's close to 1900. So 93, a6, there is such a system against 93, and I play the chameleon setup. 92 is called the chameleon setup because sometimes white plays d4 and takes with the knight, and it's the same as knight f3. D4 takes. So, but the knight here is a chameleon. It tries to look like it's on f3, but it has other options as well. For example, g3, bishop g2 without d4 also is possible. This is the advantage of this system. He goes b5, I go d4, take, bishop b7, attacking this pawn, and here I go a3. I actually forgot what my prep was here in this line, but a3 is a normal move. But there are other moves. There is bishop d3, there is bishop g5, I think here, but a3 is normal. I'm preventing him from going b4. He goes e6, I go g3, f5. This move over the board I thought is a little bit too much, and the engine agrees. So he goes for this pawn of mine, and he can win it actually because it's pinned because of his bishop that's seeing my rook here. Sorry for this poor imitation of an arrow, but his king is still in the center. He's not developed, and it's suicidal to win a pawn like that. So I decide, you know what, you can have my pawn. I go bishop g2, he goes knight f6, putting more pressure. Now, of course, I don't try to desperately defend this pawn, I just castle. I say, okay, take my pawn. He takes it, and now I go bishop g5, pinning him. And you will see that all my pieces are out now. All my minor pieces are out, whereas his bishop is not out yet, his knight is not out yet, and his king has not castled yet. So he is very much lagging behind in development. And even though he's up a pawn, it's not a happy position for him. He goes bishop e7, I take, and I take on e4. And now I'm threatening various checks, and then winning that bishop on b7, which is very unpleasant. So he has to trade the bishop for the knight, and now his rook is hanging in the corner, so he has to go rook a7, which is a little bit clumsy. And now I've won my pawn back, but we have an opposite colored bishop position, where my bishop is just a monster, and he is still underdeveloped. So I go queen d3, taking this pawn. He goes g6, trying to put his bishop probably here and castle into safety, but he has no time to do that. I go rook d1. And the problem is that if he castles, he will incur very, very devastating losses, which will happen in the game. He should have done something like queen b6 or queen e7, as shown by the engine, but still, my position is much better. He decides to castle, and now I go for a lone forced variation. I calculated it all, and my calculation was correct. I take, sacking the bishop. He takes, I take with check. Now it doesn't matter if he blocks or goes here, I am still going to go knight e6. And this will lead to a position where he will have a rook and a couple of minor pieces for a queen and a bunch of pawns, but his king is so weak that it's completely winning for me. So he draws back, I take. Now, of course, he has to take because both his queen and his bishop are hanging, and if he goes like queen here, then I'll take the exchange and I'll be just winning. So he takes the knight. I take with check first. Important. I take with check first, because if I take the queen and then he takes, and then I take with check, then he probably has a fate, even though it's probably not the best square for him, but I wanted to not leave him too many alternatives, so I first check him, and now I take the queen. And we get to this position where if he is able to consolidate his pieces and activate his pieces, if he is able to transport his knight, for example, to some active square, maybe to d4, fantastic square for the knight. If he's able to activate his rook somehow, to double up, to try to attack me, maybe he can have some chances, but he doesn't have the time. His pieces are scattered. And it doesn't matter that like I have a bunch of pawns, it matters, of course, but what matters more is the situation with his king. He cannot defend the king. And I use this, all my moves, by the way, here are top engine choices, but not because I'm like a genius or something, but because they are just obvious. So I go rook e1, I want to activate my rook and checkmate him like this, because his king doesn't have too many squares. So he goes knight d7, trying to block like this and this, for example. I go queen h3, a very important move. Still, it's winning even without it, but it's very beautiful. First, I go queen h3, checking him. He has to go here. Now my rook is free to go to the 7th rank, completely paralyzing him. And I want to threaten queen e6 check here. So he sidesteps, goes king f8, and now my queen drops back to e6. So my queen made this pendulum-like motions to leave the path to the rook. And now they are well coordinated, and black can do nothing, and black resigned in this position because checkmate is threatened, and the only way to save is knight f5, but then I'll just take the rook and I'll be up a lot of material. So this is an important win, 99% accuracy. This is the second win in a row. Now we are going to take a look at the fourth win in a row that I managed to score. The third win was also very important. I won a game against a Fide master from Russia, whom I managed to lose to in the previous tournament, in the first round. So I got my revenge, and it was a nice game, but I think the two games that I'm about to show you are more exciting, more interesting, so let's dive into this. So I'm playing with the black pieces. I'm playing against the tournament leader, the guy with the rating of around 2100, and he was at 4 out of 4 points at this point, and I had 3 out of 4, and I had to win on demand to catch him in the lead. So let's see. e4. I know that he is a very stable player. He plays, for example, against the Sicilian, he plays c3, which is a very drawish variation. Against e6 French, that I also play sometimes, he plays the exchange French. And this is very boring, and it's hard to play for a win with black here, down a tempo in a symmetrical position. So I decided to go for the sharpest and the riskiest opening for black against e4, the modern defense, g6. I let him occupy the center, but I play against it. So this is what happens. This is very standard here. He goes queen d2. I actually play in the same way against the modern, as you probably know. b5, now bishop d3. Bishop d3 is a normal move. I go bishop b7, he goes a4. a4, I think it's one of the moves. It's one of the theoretical moves in the position, but I prefer here to castle alone, of course, in such positions. But then there is b4 and an attack on the king, so he decided to play more positionally, true to his style. I go b4, he draws back, now I defend the pawn. This game, guys, is crazy. You are going to enjoy it. Lots of twists and turns in this one. So he goes knight f3. I go knight d7, a very standard approach, developing the knight. He goes c3, trying to break apart this pawn chain of mine. I go c5, strengthening this pawn chain. He goes knight g3, developing, and I go h5. h5, I want to go h4 in many variations. I'm playing very aggressive chess. I know that he'll probably castle short, so this will be good for me. I'm not necessarily even castling in this position. Maybe I go king f8 and attack on the h file. We will see. He decides to go h4, and I didn't like this move because this gives me the g4 square. So it's a very committal move, and the engine agrees it's not the best move. So immediately I jump in with my knight to put it on g4. And here I calculated briefly that he can go e5, but I have ways to prevent any shenanigans. For example, I can take here, and take here, and go here, and he does not have any e6 attacks on me because his rook is hanging. So this is one of the variations that could have occurred. Instead of e5, he, being a cautious player, decides not to go for these complications, and he just castles, but this allows me to put my knight on g4. This outpost is marvelous. Now he's wishing he could have played pawn back to h3, but it's impossible. My knight is cemented here, and his bishop is about to get taken, unless he does something. And if I take his bishop, I will have an uncontested dark squared bishop of my own, which will be a monster piece here. It already is a masterpiece, but if white has no dark squared bishop to combat it, it's even stronger here in such positions. So he takes a pawn, and I decide to gambit a pawn to win this uncontested dark square bishop for myself. So I take his bishop. Here, it was probably best to take by the queen, but I don't know what he thought about it. Probably he wanted to open up the f file for attack. This is why he took by the pawn. Now I take on c3. He takes. And of course, I do not take this pawn. Yes, I will be down a pawn, but I do not take this pawn because if I take it like this, he has this check and he's putting more pressure on me, and he will probably break with e5 at some point, and my king will be, if my king will be on f8, then this is very weak. So of course I do not take by the knight, and if I take by the pawn, well, he also has bishop b5 pinning me, and I cannot even castle. So I decided, you know what, I'll gambit a pawn. I castle in this position. I allow him to take my pawn, and now I'm down a pawn. This pawn is weak, but look at this bishop of mine. Look at this bishop of mine. It's also potentially very, very dangerous. I have the two bishops. Look at this king of his. Look at this weak knight, for example, on g3, weak pawn on h4. Those weak pawns. I thought that I should be better, even though I'm down a pawn, and the engine agrees. This was the correct evaluation. But here is the point in the game where he started to playing like a beast. So he went rook b1, attacking the bishop. I defended with the knight and also potentially put pressure on e4. He goes knight g5, and suddenly it seems very clever for him to have taken with the f pawn, because the f7 square is very weak. If he goes bishop c4, if he goes queen a2 and piles up on this f7 square, I don't really have enough defenders. So I panicked here a little bit. What I should have gone for was bishop f6, which is counterintuitive, but I should have given him back this dark squared bishop to prevent this attack. I didn't think of that. So instead, I decided to go d5, which is the second best line according to the engine. And yeah, it's logical, but he has very many good opportunities here. For example, I did see this. He could sacrifice his knight like this. And I saw this idea, and I thought that he should go queen e2 here to take here and threaten mate. But I thought that I will have some ways to get back into the game. The engine approves of this. f6, for example, is a move, very scary looking position, but black has some counter chances. But instead of queen e2, which I saw, he has e5 here, and apparently white is better, even though black is up a whole piece for like a couple of pawns, because he has bishop h7, because he has ideas of putting the queen here, because he has knight h7, knight f6 ideas. Very, very scary. But he probably decided that maybe he didn't see it, maybe he decided that it's nothing. So instead he went bishop c2. He went bishop c2, opening up this file, and now I'm again better, but it's a very crazy position, and we have not too much time. Here I go queen c7, attacking his knight. Actually, it's one of the best moves. And again, I was expecting knight h5. And I thought that it should be good enough for me. I will have some queen g3 ideas. I will have some counterplay against him. The engine says it's equal after e takes d5, queen g3, bishop h7 check here, and bishop c2. And it's a draw, apparently. Why? I don't know. Probably because there is a threat of here. And if there is also this threat. So yeah, king j8 is the best move, but then he can just repeat. Wow, that's not something I calculated. Obviously, I didn't see this idea. I saw the idea of taking on h5, but not the idea of giving a check on h7 with the bishop. Instead, after queen c7, he decides to go for some more craziness, and he sacrifices the rook. rook takes b7, which is a very flashy move, and I underestimated it. I should have taken by the knight, but I did not want to distract my knight from the center, so I took by the queen. And he's down in exchange for a pawn, but he takes this pawn, and now he has 2 pawns for the exchange, so a knight and 2 pawns for a rook. And black is still better, but he has annoying counterplay, and we are getting low on time both, and it was a little bit crazy. Here I decided to go rook d8, attack this pawn, and I wanted to provoke c4, which is what he did. Now my bishop is even stronger. My bishop is seeing the whole diagonal, and I thought that the pawns on the light squares are bad because he has the light squared bishop, and ideally I want him to put the pawn on e4, and this bishop will be staring at its own pawns, and I will infiltrate on the dark squares. So that was my idea, and actually I managed to implement it, well, almost. So I went queen e7, putting pressure here potentially. Also I want to go queen e5 in some variations. He goes queen f2, putting more pressure over here, but it's defended for the time being. Now I go rook e8. I'm attacking this pawn. He goes e4. Now this is the dream for me. This is a bad move actually. He was in time trouble, so he shouldn't have done this. It's not a good pawn on e4. You should like give it up. It's better because the bishop will be active in the attack. Now it's not active. And I block it with the bishop e5, and now the dark squares belong to me. Completely belong to me. This is very, very nice. He has no dark squared bishop again. That's the pride of my position. He drops back. Now I go bishop d6. Apparently the engine likes bishop b8 even better to transfer it to a7. I didn't think of this plan. Looks very logical now. Or bishop c7 is also good, the engine says. But I went bishop d6, also a good move. The idea is to put the queen here and try to harass the king on the dark squares. And here, in time pressure, he blunders. He goes here. Unfortunately for him, he misses the idea I have. Now I go here and I fork his knight and the mate threat, so he has to give up the knight. Now he tries to activate the bishop finally to do something, some shenanigans, but I just I sacrifice the rook for a knight and a pawn, and now I'm up a knight for a pawn, and still many threats persist to his king. He tries to exchange the queens. Actually, I can exchange the queens here, but I decide to go for some checks first, and then go bishop e5. I'm threatening this, and the queen is hanging. He goes here. Now I check him again, activate my rook. And now I decide that now my pieces are very active. I can exchange the queens and win the endgame, of course. So he has to take, and this is very easy. So I activate my pieces even more. Now he cannot take here because bishop c3 will be a fork. He tries to push his pawn, but my king is in time, and finally he succumbs to the pressure and he takes this pawn and hands the rook, and resigns. But of course there's nothing to be done here. Next moves by me will be just king here, king takes, or rook takes here with check. There are lots of options for me and none for him. So I get this important win, and now I'm sharing the first place. After this game, I have 4 points, and in the last round, 4 out of 5, there is an opponent that I'm playing against who's also at 4 out of 5, and he has the better Buchholz. So this is the number that says whoever gets the prize if you share, for example, first place. So the tiebreaker. He has the better tiebreaker. So again, I have to play for a win against a guy from Turkey who is rated 2180, almost 2200. And I'm like, okay, after what I've done already, like 4 wins in a row, I need to get the 5th win. So let's see if I manage to do it. Again, I'm playing with the black pieces, the 2nd time in a row. Again, I have to get this victory, but you know already what happened. This is actually one of the nicest games in this tournament, I should say. I played at 93, I think, % accuracy in this one, and it was a very nice attack. You will enjoy this. So my opponent plays d4, and my opponent plays the Jubava London, a very trendy variation. So very often white puts the knight here, tries to go for this attack, but it's okay. Black equalizes if black knows what he's doing. Knight a6 looks clumsy, but I have to defend this c7 pawn. Now I develop. He goes here, and now I decide, you know what? I can go for his bishop. I can win his bishop for my knight, which resembles the game that I won in the last round of the previous tournament. Have you watched the video of me, my comeback in the previous tournament? There I scored 4.5 out of 6. In this one I scored 5 out of 6, so even better. But in that one I also played the last round game, beautiful game where I went for a similar plan. I wanted to win his bishop. Here he goes bishop e5, provoking f6, but I thought that f6 is in my favor because I will have a stronger center. I'll take his bishop and kick this knight of his, kick it back. And now, of course, I thought that I could go knight c7 and then later, only later, go e5, but I didn't like e4 for him. I thought that he can open up the center. Yes, I can go e5, but there are some complications and my king is still in the center and this diagonal is weak. If somehow I take here and later he puts the bishop on this diagonal, then it's not pleasant for me. And I decided, you know what, instead of moving this knight, I'm okay if he spoils my pawn structure and gives up his bishop for my knight. I will have 2 bishops for 2 knights. Let's play this position. So I go e5, he immediately takes. And the engine says it's around equal. The engine would have preferred if I had not spoiled my pawn structure. But humanly speaking, I think it's a great decision because now I have 2 bishops, I have an attack, I need to play for a win. So why not? Why not? Let's see how it continues. So he goes knight a4, very, very precise. He wants to put the knight on this square. This is a standard idea, and my b pawn is absent and cannot kick it away, but it's okay. I go rook b8. I'm putting pressure on b2, and now he cannot go knight c5 because this pawn is hanging, so he has to do something about it. First he goes c3. Apparently he wants b4 and then knight c5, but I don't want him to go b4, so I go a5. Every move of mine is very logical. It is to prevent him from getting what he wants. Whenever you're playing chess, you should look for your opponent's intentions and ideally prevent them. Unless the intentions are stupid, then you can allow them, but it's very tricky to realize, to understand when the intentions are good enough and when they are not. Not many people can do this. So he castles here. I also castle. I thought of even going h5, h4 immediately, going for an attack, or first e4 and then h5. And the engine actually says that this is the best course of action here. But I was hesitant to do this because my king is in the center and he can blow open the center with c4. And I was not feeling too comfortable in this position. I thought first I tuck away my king in the corner and then I go for e4, h5, h4, the same plan. This is what I came up with. So rook e1, e4, knight drops back. Now f5 first, because my queen needs to control h4 when I push h4. So my queen will need to see h4 in any case. So I could have played h5 first and then f5 and h4, but it doesn't really matter. So knight d2, f5, and my idea is to destroy him on the king side with my bishops opening up the position, and his idea is to use my weak pawn structure to win some pawns and get the win. So he goes knight c5, putting the knight on this outpost, and he's disregarding the threat on the b2 pawn, apparently because I thought that if I take, he can go like this, yeah, like this, and my rook is trapped, and next he can go here and trap my rook. I thought it's not too scary, actually. I thought I could sacrifice this rook. But instead, I decided, you know what? I'm not in a rush to take this pawn. I can continue with my plan. I can go h5 first and see what he is doing. Because h4 is very unpleasant. Already the engine prefers black to a significant extent. Queen a4. Now he is continuing his plan of trying to play against my weaknesses. But now I decided that I can finally take this pawn, because this knight is hanging. So, and if he goes knight d2 b3, then I have this square, for example, for the rook, so the rook is not hanging, and I can go h4, and if he takes, I activate my queen, and now my queen and rook create some checkmating patterns, so it's not good for him. So I decided, yeah, now after this queen a4 move by my opponent, which is rather careless, I think I just can take this pawn and attack the knight, and then I can go h4, and I really like my position. Here he realizes he's done a wrong thing, and he drops back, trying to cement his position with the knight, but still I go h4. I allow him to take this pawn of mine, because it doesn't matter. I take another pawn. He takes by the pawn, which is surprising. I thought he'll take by the knight, but he didn't like the fact that I can push like this in future. Probably this is what I would have done, but nonetheless, taking by pawn is a little bit horrible, and I decided that it shouldn't be the best move for him. Now I find the best move. I go rook b6. My rook is no longer needed on the second rank. It's needed to protect here, and in some variations it will activate via the 6th rank. It will be put on f6 or h6 to checkmate my opponent, and I was confident. At this point, I had like 20 minutes left. I did not have much time to calculate all the variations, but I knew that this position should be maybe not winning for me according to the engine, but in practical play, very hard to defend. So he drops back, I go g5, and my pawns are all in. I want to go f4 next. I want to blow open the position. Finally, this bishop will also see the light of day. This bishop is a nice defender. This rook can activate like this or like this. This queen will activate like this probably. This rook can activate like this. So lots of opportunities to activate. All my pieces are looking at his king, and his king is not looking nice. And here he decides to get greedy. He takes my pawn, which is a fatal mistake. I did not think he'd do that. I thought he'll drop back, probably try to defend, but he decided, okay, I'll take his pawn, but this is fatal. Already this is close to losing, because I go f4, and my pawns are rolling. And apparently my opponent didn't see the next move that I did here, because otherwise he would have probably taken, but it's already bad. It's already bad. If he takes, well, I can take by the rook. I probably would have taken by the rook, but the engine prefers even queen h4. It's even stronger. And then next, taking by the rook. The position of white is in shambles. So instead of taking, he does another thing. He goes knight a4, which serves the purpose of winning my rook, because the rook is pinned to the queen, and probably I don't want to move the rook back to exchange the queens. Then I will not be able to checkmate him. But I don't need this rook. I just go f3, which is a brilliant move according to chess.com's engine. And the next one will also be a brilliant move. So, but it's not hard to find. So the idea is f2 check. It's a fork. So he can, of course, take my rook, but I will take his rook and win a rook for a pawn, and he will win just a rook for a knight, so I will be a piece up. And if he takes, which is what happened in the game, again, another brilliant move according to chess.com, but it's not too brilliant in my opinion. I just took and renewed my threat of f2 check. And the important idea is that if he blocks, I have rook b6 check, which is first of all a check, and then a discovered attack on the queen. So I sacrifice a rook, but I win the queen. This is maybe what he could have missed from afar, even though it's a very basic tactic. And if he goes king h1, the same thing. Rook h6 check, and I get his queen, and also he will be checkmated. So here I calculated some variations that could have occurred. I thought that he could play something like rook somewhere, for example here. And then I calculated f2 check. So if he goes to h1, then of course this is a check that wins the queen again. So he cannot go to h1, but he could go to g2. And then I calculated bishop h3 check. So if he takes, again, rook h6 wins the queen, so he cannot take. He cannot take this pawn because it's defended by the rook. So the only move, or two moves he has are king h2 or king h1. Doesn't really matter. In any case, I go rook h6. And his queen is again hanging, but also there is another threat. If he takes my queen, bishop takes f1 is a discovered check and a mate. This is what I calculated. Before going for this line, I spent like several minutes to make sure that it works, and it works. But it's not even necessary. I did not even have to deliver this checkmate. I could have taken the queen and then delivered some devastating blow, but this would have been beautiful. So if he goes rook c1 or rook d1, something like this, avoiding this fork, then I have this beautiful line with lots of sacrifices. He probably calculated it at this point and decided, okay, I'll take your rook, give up the piece. So I take his rook and queen. He has to take, and now I take, and I emerge up a piece in this position, and the two bishops are still very dangerous, and his king is very weak. But there is some technique required, of course, which I demonstrate. In this position, I win in like 4 moves. He resigns in 4 moves, which is fast. He goes queen b5, and probably he wants to drop back in this position, and also he's putting pressure on the d5 pawn, but I completely disregard it, and I make the best move according to the engine, queen f6. I say, take my pawn with check, I don't care, because if he takes my pawn with check, I can just block, and he cannot stop various mating attacks on his king, or at least maybe it will be not mate, but I will take a rook or a queen. So this is out of the question. Instead, he goes rook b1, trying to move the rook away from this vulnerable square, but I check him, and I go bishop f5, attacking the rook, and once the rook moves, I go bishop h3, and he resigns because his knight is attacked too many times, and if the rook goes back to b1 to defend it, then the queen g2 will be a checkmate, rook b1, queen g2, and otherwise, if he moves the knight, then queen g2 as well, and if he moves it here, then queen takes g3 will also demolish him, mate will follow soon. So he resigns, and I get this win, I get this cup, I get some money, and I get some rating. Now I'm finally over 2000 Fide in classical, but this is not, of course, the end of the journey. I need to get to 2300 to become a Fide master. Do you think I can make it? Did you like the games? Please drop a comment, and thank you for watching this. Bye bye.